Let's now discuss Manfred Penniman's processability theory. Processability theory was proposed by Manfred Penniman, and it refers to the grammatical development of learners' interlanguage. A key word over here is the interlanguage, and that is what the object or the focal point of this particular theory is. It is cognitively founded, and therefore it is not only applicable to one language, it can be applicable to other or multiple languages. It is formal and explicit, and its hypotheses about morphology, syntax, discourse, pragmatic have been tested. At the same time, it paves a way for further development and the interface, the interconnectivity point between the grammar and the vocabulary or the lexicon, and other important modules of second language acquisition. The very basis of processability theory is that at any stage of development, learners can produce and understand only those second language forms which the current state of their language processes can handle. Now, that current stage is a stage of interlanguage. Interlanguage, we know, is a language generated by a learner where he has certain aspects of his own mother tongue grammatical linguistic units, and then while moving towards the acquiring of the target language, some aspects or some linguistic units of the target language are also incorporated, and based on the mother tongue linguistic units and the target linguistic units, the learner generates his or her own interlanguage. Now, understanding of language development are on two formal models describing and interfacing. Number one is language generation, and second is linguistic knowledge. So basically what happens is, and how those second language forms are processed, they can be described through these two models, which are language generation and linguistic knowledge. For language generation, processability theory relies on Levelet's model, which refers to language processing in real time and within human psychological constraints such as word access and human memory. The process, how you follow from conceptualization to formulation to articulation and to self-monitoring. So these are different stages that a learner goes through. Now, in conceptualization, the learner conceptualizes what he or she wishes to communicate. Then after conceptualization, you move on to formulation, where you formulate the thought into linguistic plan, the lexicons basically. And then you execute the plan through the biological speech system, that how you articulate those linguistic plans. And from after articulation, you move on to self-monitoring, which monitors the speech to check whether it is what we intend to convey and how we intend to say it. It contributes towards solving for SLA what is known as the developmental problem. Why do learners follow the universal stage of acquisition? So this particular language generation contributes towards solving the very pertinent question that we come across in SLA is how and why do learners follow universal stages of acquisition? For linguistic knowledge, processability theory relies on Bresnan's model, which is lexical functional grammar. It is non-transformational, it's a declarative. It is lexicalist approach to grammar and having a principle of lexical integrity. So basically, linguistic knowledge, for the meaningful understanding of linguistic knowledge, this processability theory relies on LGF. Now, this theory is a lexicalist approach, where the principal parameter of this LFG is lexical integrity, according to which, from the point of view of syntax, words cannot be divided into smaller units. So when we are looking at syntactical properties, words cannot be divided into smaller units. That is, syntactic rules neither form words nor do they access their internal structure. So they cannot be subdivided into smaller units to see or to assess their internal units. LFG encodes syntactic properties primarily in the lexicon. So if we look at this particular phrase, we see that lexical functional grammar encodes the syntactical, which are syntactic properties are related to sentence structures, and they are encoded in lexical. So words or vocabulary are of paramount importance as far as this particular theory is concerned. It also contributes towards solving for SLA, the so-called logical problem. And that logical problem is, why do people end up knowing more than they can hear? And how does a learner know what words can be noun, verbs, etc.? So this contributes in the understanding of particular knowledge of learners' understanding in terms of how you can label a word, noun, verbs, or adjectives, and how people or why people end up knowing more than they can hear. Feynman understands development as a process in which the development of more complex structures happen gradually, beginning with the lowest number of structural properties to which other properties are later on added through development. So it's starting with the simple structure and then adding information as you move on, or gradually you develop a complex structure. According to Feynman, learner's interlanguage stabilizes if the learner makes a large number of bare choices. So when you're making error and they are not corrected at the interlanguage level, then those errors are stabilized. There are no changes and no improvement and no correction that takes place. Now Feynman and Kepler point out following important factors in the explanation of PT. The second language development progresses according to universal stages which are limited by the language processing hierarchy. So they follow the second language development progresses according to universal stages. There are particular stages which are fixed and they are universal for all languages. Variability of an interlanguage is limited and regular. The variation in terms of the linguistic understanding of interlanguage is limited and regular. Transfer from the first language is limited by the ability to process a certain structure. So transferring of linguistic element or units from first language is limited. Differences in tasks are also limited. Acquisition of both the first and second language is limited by the language processing hierarchy. Bilingual language development can be universally compared for different languages using the language processing hierarchy described by Processability Theory. To conclude, Processability Theory looks into the development of interlanguage and proposes that second language learners can produce only those second language structure which they can process at any given point in time, emphasizing thus the fact that developmental stages cannot be escaped.